Hi everyone, my name is Sara Govin, and today I will be discussing Broca's area and the effects trauma can have on language and speech. I became interested in this part of the brain because people who have experienced trauma often say that they cannot explain what happened or can't put their emotions into words. We briefly discussed this experience through the hand model of the brain, but I wanted to understand what might actually be happening neurologically when someone becomes speechless during a traumatic event or flashback. What I learned is that Broca's area is important, but it doesn't work alone. Trauma can affect a larger network involving language, memory, emotion, body awareness, and the brain's survival response. Broca's area is located in the left inferior frontal gyrus, near the lower back portion of the frontal lobe. It usually refers to two regions known as Brodmann areas 44 and 45. Area 44, also known as the pars apocularis, is more involved in processing speech sounds and planning the movements needed for speech. Area 45, called the pars triangularis, is more involved in selecting words, processing meaning, and organizing language. Most people are left hemisphere dominant for language, although there can be individual differences. Older descriptions often call Broca's area the brain speech production center. However, current research shows that this description is too simple. It's more accurate to think of Broca's area as an important hub within a much larger language network. During normal functioning, Broca's area helps turn an internal thought into language that another person can understand. It supports our ability to choose the correct words, combine them into meaningful sentences, and plan the speech sounds and physical movements needed to say those sentences. It also contributes to inner speech and verbal working memory. These functions allow us to hold words in our mind while organizing what we want to say. The two main sections of Broca's area don't perform exactly the same job. 45 is more connected with meaning and word selection, while 44 is more connected with speech sounds and motor planning. This expands on the older idea that one small part of the brain simply creates speech. Speaking is actually a sequence of coordinated mental and physical processes, and Broca's area helps organize that sequence. To speak, the brain first has to access the meaning of an idea. Frontal and temporal regions then help to select the appropriate words. Broca's area contributes to organizing those words into a sentence and creating a plan for producing the necessary sounds. The anterior insula and premotor areas help translate that plan into coordinated physical movements. The motor cortex, brainstem, breathing muscles, larynx, tongue, and lips then work together to produce speech. Auditory systems listen to our own voices and help us make corrections in real time. Modern research describes dorsal and ventral language pathways instead of one simple path between Broca's area and Wernicke's area. The dorsal pathway is especially important for connecting sounds with movements, while the ventral pathway helps connect words with meaning. This network becomes especially important when studying trauma because intense stress can affect communication among several of these systems at once. During a traumatic event or powerful reminder of the trauma, the brain survival system takes priority. The amygdala and salience network rapidly detect possible danger. The autonomic nervous system prepares for the body to fight, freeze, or flee, or even shut down. This response may cause a person's heart rate to change, breathing, muscle tension, or ability to focus. Sensory details and emotional reactions may become extremely strong. At the same time, brain regions responsible for monitoring, organizing, or verbally describing an experience may become less active or connected. This doesn't mean that Broca's area is damaged or completely shuts off in every person. Instead, access to its language functions may be temporarily reduced when the nervous system is highly activated. This helps explain why someone might feel intense emotions and physical sensations during trauma but struggle to create an organized verbal account of what's happening. Some of the best known evidence comes from brain imaging studies involving people with post-traumatic stress disorder or PTSD. In a 1996 study, Ronch and his colleagues asked 8 adults with PTSD to listen to their personalized trauma scripts and neural scripts while researchers measured blood flow in their brains. During the traumatic imagery, participants showed increased activity in right-sided emotional and visual regions. However, they also showed decreased activity in the left interior frontal cortex and middle temporal cortex. In 1999, Shin and her colleagues studied 8 women with PTSD and 8 trauma-exposed women who did not currently have PTSD. During traumatic imagery, only the PTSD group showed decreased blood flow in the left inferior frontal gyrus. A systematic review by Hull in 2002 also identified reduced activity in the Broca region during trauma-related symptom provocation as a repeated finding. However, it's important to consider the limitations of this research. These studies involved small groups and used older imaging methods. Therefore, I wouldn't say that Broca's area universally shuts down during trauma. A more accurate conclusion is that language processing may become less engaged during trauma recall, especially in people with PTSD. One reason trauma can feel unspeakable is that sensory and emotional information may become extremely intense while verbal integration is reduced. A person might remember a smell, image, sound, body sensation, or feeling without having an organized story with a beginning, middle, and end. Colassa and her colleagues studied brain activity in 97 survivors of war and torture with PTSD and compared them with 97 control participants. Using magnetophilography, or MEG, the researchers found abnormal slow wave activity with a peak near the insula. The insula is involved in body awareness, emotion, and certain aspects of speech and articulation. The researchers connected this brain activity with post-traumatic alexithymia. This term describes difficulty identifying, verbally expressing, and regulating emotional responses related to trauma. This study focused more directly on the insula than Broca's area, but strengthens the larger network explanation. Difficulty speaking on trauma may involve both language systems and the systems responsible for translating emotional and physical states into words. After a traumatic event, Broca-related functioning is not necessarily impaired all the time. A person may communicate normally during everyday situations, but begin struggling when a reminder activates the trauma network. During those moments, a person may pause frequently, lose words, give information out of order, or communicate using short fragments. These patterns should not automatically be interpreted as unwillingness, dishonesty, or evidence that an event didn't occur. Research also shows that trauma-related autobiographical memories include multiple prefrontal sensory, emotional, and memory systems. Thome and her colleagues found that PTSD was associated with reduced common activation in prefrontal areas involved in controlled memory retrieval and a greater emphasis on vivid re-experiencing. This supports the idea that a traumatic memory may feel as if it's being relived rather than calmly remembered and narrated. It's also important to distinguish functional changes from permanent brain injury. A person's access to language may improve when emotional arousal decreases and the person begins to feel safe again. Broca's area interacts with several other systems during a traumatic response. The amygdala detects emotional importance and possible threats. Hippocampus helps place memories into context and sequence, including when and where the event happened. The medial prefrontal cortex and anterior cortex support monitoring, emotional regulation, and the inhibition of fear responses. The insula represents internal body states and contributes to speech-related motor coordination. Posterior temporal language areas support meaning and comprehension, while premotor areas physically carry out speech. The body is also involved. Automatic nervous system activation can affect breathing rate, jaw tension, throat tension, and the physical ease of speaking. Broca's area doesn't directly control the entire bodily response, but it has to continue operating while these survival systems are active. For this reason, trauma-related speech difficulty is best understood as the brain network and the whole nervous system response. This research has several practical information Implications for trauma-informed care. First, regulation should often come before asking for a detailed narrative. If someone is extremely activated, repeatedly demanding exact words may increase distress without improving the accuracy of the person's account. Second, communication doesn't always have to begin with speaking. A person might give some writing, drawing, gestures, choices, or descriptions of physical sensations. Giving someone time to pause can also reduce pressure. Third, fragmented speech should not always be treated as evidence that someone is unreliable. Trauma may affect how memories are retrieved, organized, and verbally expressed in that moment. Finally, language can be built gradually. When a person feels safe and grounded, they may be able to identify more emotions, place events in sequence, and reflect on what the experience meant. For me, this is the most important application of the research. The goal should be not to force someone to speak before they're ready, but to create enough safety and regulation for language to become available. The main thing I learned through my research is that speechlessness after trauma can't be explained by one isolated brain region. Broca's area is important because it helps us select words, build sentence structures, plan speech sounds, and use inner speech. However, it also depends on memory, emotion, body awareness, auditory, prefrontal, and motor systems. Trauma reminders can temporarily shift the brain toward survival and away from controlled verbal organization. This can cause a memory to feel vivid, emotionally tense, and physically present while still being extremely difficult to explain. This experience is real, understandable, and not a personal failure. When safety and regulation increase, a person's access to language might also increase. Understanding this can help social workers, mental health professionals, legal professionals, and others responding to survivors with more patience, flexibility, and less judgment. These are the scholarly resources I used through my presentation. Thank you for listening.